Thank you, Mr. Fenton, members of the faculty, and student body. Dick had a rather interesting observation before we came up on the platform. He said even at Convocation they won't sit in the front pews. Perhaps we ought to devise the kind of imaginative architectural innovation which I heard about in connection with churches not long ago. The architect decided that there should be only one pew in the church. That was the back pew. But when you sat down in the back pew, it immediately moved up to the front row. In addition to this, of course, was a pulpit that disappeared after 20 minutes. With the school year actually only 2 hours old, I'm sure that it is still in order to welcome all of you to Augsburg College and to another year of activity on this campus. It is customary for the president to begin the school year by saying that this is the biggest, the best looking, and the smartest student body we've ever had. So I will begin by saying this is the biggest, the best looking, and the smartest student body we have ever had. And we're happy to welcome you. It's also customary for the president to have some words of wisdom, probably more words than wisdom, but something to say as a kind of a starter for the new school year. And so this morning I would like to speak to you about the spirit which I pray will obtain as we approach this new school year here at Augsburg College. You may know that we begin now the 100th school year in the history of this institution. And the beginning of this 100th year shares the same characteristic as most of the other school years which have been started by the grace of God, namely struggle. I have learned that the history of this institution is synonymous with struggle. The institution 99 years ago struggled in a little town in Wisconsin to get started. It struggled to become something vital and meaningful, significant. It has struggled to survive. It has been a school which is familiar with crises. School years have been commenced with too few teachers. The first school year began with one teacher. School years have begun with no place to meet, with no funds to continue, or without some of the necessary accreditations which belong to a recognized academic institution. These do not describe the nature of the crisis which marks the beginning of this school year. For our struggle today is in terms of something far more significant. What we are involved in is a struggle for meaning, for value, for worth. In a time when the pervading spirit abroad is the spirit of frustration. And that marks more than just some of the experiences that you had on registration day. There is frustration abroad. We all share it. We are frustrated by this war from which we do not seem to be able to disentangle ourselves, but which affects the lives of all of us. We are frustrated by the racial crisis which continues to boil. We are frustrated by the festering cities and their problems. We are frustrated by the impersonal character of our technological society, which can pervade even our somewhat small campus by the limitations of data processing and the failure to get this card or that card or something else out of the machine. We're frustrated by the bumbling democratic process, which does not seem to adequately respond to the deep desires and needs of people. We are frustrated by the establishment, by its very apparent failures, by its intransigence, by its obtuseness, and by its brutality. Now, I don't need to tell you that the spirit of frustration always breeds destruction. Some of the frustration in registration quickly destroyed some of the optimistic smiles on the faces of students, both returning and new. And the destruction which is wrought from frustration moves in two directions. It moves in the direction of social destruction. We see this in terms of violence. Or it moves in the direction of personal destruction, in terms of opting out, dropping out, a kind of a gradual suicide in one's relationships to other people and even to oneself. And when the winds of violence blow and the acids of disillusion are present, there is one great enemy, and that is the enemy of despair. This is the thing I fear the most when the spirit of frustration is abroad. Despair. And yet, this morning, I hear a voice which says across the centuries and speaks with as much relevance today as when it was first heard. I came not to destroy, but to fulfill. It is this statement that gives me reason to believe from the depths of my being that life is on the side of fulfillment. These words were spoken at a time when there was a great deal of frustration. For when these words were uttered, poverty was known not simply by a segment of society, but by most of society. And it was the kind of grinding poverty that we don't know anything about, even in the midst of the problems which do exist in our own midst. These words were spoken at a time when tyranny had the upper hand, and peoples and nations were crushed under the heel of the conqueror, who had no concern but to enslave people and to exact exorbitant revenues. It was a time when the hypocrisy of the establishment was terribly evident. All about there was the tinder for revolution. And in that moment came the word, I came not to destroy, but to fulfill. Not to break, but to bind up. Not to hurt, but to heal. The spirit of frustration can be overcome only by the spirit of fulfillment. Now, the word fulfillment is used commonly in three ways, among others. We speak of fulfilling a promise. My little girl comes to me and says, "But Daddy, you promised." And there's an obligation to fulfill the promise. We use the word in terms of potential, fulfilling a person's potential. And all the students here have been looked at in terms of their potential, the possibilities which exist. And we use this word also in terms of the fulfillment of purposes, of goals, of objectives. Let me speak about these three ways of fulfillment here on the Augsburg campus, in order that we can begin this year with a spirit of fulfillment. We have some promises to fulfill. Let me mention four. First, we have made the promise to you that you will get here at Augsburg College an education which is adequate to your needs and desires, an education which is relevant to the issues of today, and an education which is exciting and stimulating and provocative. I believe that this is the kind of education which we have indicated you ought to get at this institution. Adequate, relevant, and exciting. This is not easily accomplished, but it can be accomplished if we are willing, first of all, to listen to each other. If we are willing to keep on talking and discussing and investigating together. If we will expect to discover things. I know this is a perennial problem on college campuses, to get out of this dull game of just playing what's on your mind as far as the professor is concerned. Sitting, listening, figuring out what he wants, regurgitating it, hoping you get a grade. I really have no answers as to how one can engender this the spirit of search and of discovery. I suspect that it resides not only in the student, but primarily in the spirit and in the heart and in the approach of the professor. Let me tell you about one of the most stimulating experiences which I had in college. When the school year started, the only man on the faculty who was teaching philosophy passed away. And in that community, and in those days, it wasn't possible to reach out and find a graduate student or someone else who could fill in. But there was a young man who had been invited to teach on the religion faculty. He was not trained to teach philosophy, but he was a very capable person. We were 11 persons in the class, and I remember the first day. He came and he said, "Gentlemen, you know the circumstances. I've been asked to teach this class. I have to confess that I really don't know anything more about it than you do. But if we can get together on this thing, I think we can have a real good year in the study of the history of philosophy." Now, I'm sure there were many deficiencies in that class and many holes in what we received. But it was a stimulating and exciting experience because we were looking and learning and listening together. And with this must come also certain living experience. And I think this is one of the things that we're struggling with here at Augsburg. To create a community with all of the problems which we have in terms of a commuting student body together with a resident student body, with this tendency to think in terms of a 7:30 to 4:30 day or whatever it is, to not only listen to each other and not only learn together, but also to touch each other in these vital experiences which really bring people together. And I think last year proved to us how fortunate we are to have, for example, the College Center, where in commodious and comfortable surroundings we can touch each other and in that way get to know one another and be stimulated in our learning experience. This is one promise that we have to fulfill. the promise of a quality education. The second promise that we have to fulfill is that the Christian faith will make a difference on this campus. You know when you came to Augsburg that you came to a church-related college. We have a certain stance, a certain point of view. And it is to the fulfillment of our responsibilities in this area that we must give ourselves. What does this mean? This means that we must give an open opportunity to the careful, disciplined study of faith as it is expressed in the Christian faith and in the non-Christian faith. It means not only that we have an opportunity to study religion and faith, but that we have the opportunity openly and voluntarily to express that faith in worship services such as chapel, or in smaller group meetings, or in an individual way. And here I would like to plead for the kind of tolerance which I believe ought to exist on a college campus that is church-related, that we are willing to allow all kinds of expressions, all sides of the religious experience, all facets of religious expression. It's so easy to categorize and name call and so on in this area. But I think we ought to be free and open also in the possibilities for religious expression. I believe that the Christian spirit must inform this college also in terms of our evaluation of every individual as created and redeemed by God, and therefore to be accepted and treated as one who has a holy calling. We believe in the sacredness of human personality. We believe in other people. We believe that God has something for each person and that there is a place for each individual, and that you cannot violate an individual without violating something that is holy and sacred. To fulfill this promise that the Christian faith will make a difference on this campus will also mean that in our relationships we exercise the ultimate law of love, to love thy neighbor as thyself. Our conduct here is going to be, we pray, under that kind of guidance. One should not have to have all kinds of rules and regulations if our conduct in the classroom and on the campus and in the dormitory or wherever we are is judged by our concern for the other person, for his rights, for his property, for his personality. This, I believe, is what makes a difference, the difference, on a Christian campus that should be pervaded by the Christian spirit. Now, not all by that, unfortunately. Therefore, it becomes necessary for us to have what we call rules and regulations. But these are not intended to be the chief controlling factor. The chief controlling factor is a love of one's fellow men, which is derived from the fact that God loves us. The third promise that we have to fulfill is the promise that our students on this campus shall be colleagues. Colleagues in the community with genuine responsibility commensurate with age, education, and experience. And I sincerely hope that in our discussions and in our meetings and in our considerations over this next school year, we can hammer out a more significant participation on the part of students in the decisions of this institution, in the direction of this institution, and in those things which affect our lives as a community. I believe we have this promise to fulfill. The fourth promise is that sensitivity to minority problems will be heightened. We came to this conclusion, of course, after our experience last spring. And several fine suggestions were made. And these things are under consideration. And unfortunately, so many things that we have to do finally become problems of a fiscal character, budget. But I want you to know that we are committed to the fulfillment of the promise that this community will be informed and sensitized to the problems of the minorities in our city and in our nation. This we must do. I believe that we owe these things which I have mentioned to you students, and that it is up to the administration and the faculty to deliver. But these promises cannot be fulfilled unilaterally or by force or fiat. We need to have confidence in one another. We need to keep communicating with each other in order that there might be the ultimate in mutual cooperation, and all of this needs to be shot through with a great deal of patience and good humor. In the second place, there is in this student community a tremendous potential to fulfill. One's imagination is staggered by the possibilities which exist here. The possibilities in terms of mental and intellectual capacity. There is not a person on this campus who has used his mind to its fullest capabilities. We've never gotten, in any case, the accelerator down to the floorboard. And I believe that we must fulfill more of the potential which exists in this student body. The problem is not ability. The problem is, as it has always been, one of motivation, of getting the will to use what we've been given, to exercise the talents with which we have been endowed. I think, for example, of the abilities for artistic development and creativity, which I do not believe are being nurtured and fostered and produced as they ought to be. I have to confess that I'm a little disappointed in the paucity of good writers on this campus. People who will take language and struggle with it and become creative with it. Not only in terms of journalism, but in terms of creative writing, poetry, prose. I believe that there is too little emphasis and opportunity for exposure in terms of the musical abilities. We have a fine choir and a fine band and other musical organizations, but I believe that we need constantly to nurture this kind of expression so that we can be aware of the fact that there is all kinds of talent in this student body, if it is given a chance to flower and to grow. I think we have too few artworks around the campus produced by students. I think there's a sterility among us of this kind of artistic expression. Drama needs support. And I consider the development of the body and the coordinated exercise of it in athletics and physical education also to, in a very real sense, be an art. These abilities and talents need creatively to be nurtured in order that we can fulfill the potential which is here. I feel also that there is a tremendous amount of leadership potential that needs to be developed. We have fine student leaders elected by the students themselves. But I am afraid that there is too much difficulty experienced in getting students to take a hold of assignments and committees and projects and carrying them through. Leadership qualities need to be developed. The senses of all of us need to be sharpened and heightened toward beauty. And I hope that we have made some progress in providing more beauty about us. I remember when Father Coleman Berry, the president of St. John, spoke to our faculty a few years ago. He gave a very fine address, and then at the close he said, and don't forget beauty. And when one of our faculty members came to me this summer, when a large group of young people were registering for a convention on this campus, he was all excited. And I said, what are you excited about? He said, you know what I heard? I heard two of these young people say, isn't this a beautiful campus? We've got a long ways to go in this regard. But I think we all have to be sensitized to the need for beauty, and that a lot of the ugliness about us is of our own doing. You see, what we're all about here is to produce in a liberal arts college liberal artists. People who are laymen, who are sensitive in all fields of human activity. But I am sometimes fearful that the demands of an academic curriculum can stifle the liberal artist so that he gets so concerned about his books and his papers that these other potentialities are not realized. I guess what I'm doing this morning is putting in a plug for the humanities, because it is in this area of human thought and endeavor that one finds the spirit of human fulfillment engendered and encouraged. In the third place, we have not only promises to fulfill and potential to fulfill, but we also have purpose, goals as an institution to fulfill. By virtue of teaching here, by virtue of studying here, by virtue of working here, you and I are a part of a community known as Augsburg College. It is a community which will be an identifying mark for all of us for a long time to come. You may change your address. You may change your name. You may change your vocation. But one thing is going to follow you all through life. Where did you go to school? Where did you do your undergraduate work? And that identification is going to be important. And therefore, the strength and the value and the purpose of the institution is going to be attached to you. And therefore, all of us are a part of the fulfillment of this college. And that's why I want to say that one of the thrilling things about my 5 years at Augsburg College has been that the people who are here want the best for the institution. And therefore, the kind of criticisms which are received, particularly from students, are always welcome. Because, by and large, they come from concerned students who want their collegiate community to be the best possible. They want their college to fulfill its purpose. And that purpose is twofold. And it's stated in our ultimate aims and objectives. The first aim and objective is to serve, to contribute to the true good of society. Not to destroy, but to fulfill. And if one wants to cast this in militant terms, one could say that what we are all about is the production of fighters for fulfillment. There is a dream and an ideal for peace, but one does not fight war with war, but with a commitment to peace. There is a dream for justice, but one does not fight injustice with injustice, but by being dedicated to justice itself. There is a dream that men shall be able to carry on their activities without wondering where they're going to sleep and what they're going to eat. But you don't fight poverty with scarcity, but by a willingness to share. Racism is not fought with racism, but by a concern for genuine equality. Tyranny is not fought with tyranny, but with a love of liberty. Ugliness is not fought with ugliness, but with beauty. And I believe that Augsburg College is in a unique position with a unique opportunity to demonstrate in this city, which is a part of the emerging urban society, that educated men and women can deal with the problems of our kind of culture and society. I have never been more aware of the need for the production, if you please, of personalities who are ready and willing to grapple with these urban problems as I have been in the past few weeks. Particularly as we tried to see how this particular community, with its institutions and its residences and its aesthetic possibilities, could be developed in terms of the best objectives for the entire metropolitan and state community. And it took an all-night session the other night to finally get this thing ironed out. But it came about when reasonable people sat down and talked to other reasonable people with the desire to get something good accomplished. This is our objective, to be a part of a genuine contribution to the good of society, so that the people who work here and who graduate from here will not flee the problems which confront us, but will become involved in them. The second objective of this institution is to foster the fellowship of those who follow the Jesus way. I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about the institutional church. I'm not talking about the local congregation. I'm referring to the way of the New Testament, the way of Jesus. There's been a lot of lambasting and scorn and rejection and criticism as over against religion and the organized church. But one thing is true. Nobody's knocking Jesus. And I believe with all my heart that he has what this generation needs, a life that fulfills. That there is a way with people which genuinely cares and cures. That there is a way with problems when one unselfishly identifies himself with the people who have those problems. That his way is the way, is over against all of the evil in the world. And that is to let it touch you so that you suffer. And out of your own suffering in it, produce something that is redemptive. The other night, the faculty listened to a wonderful address by Bishop Shannon, who was formerly the president of St. Thomas College. And he made the point that no one has ever shown that Jesus' way of handling the problems of human existence contradicts or jeopardizes or compromises any discipline, any scholarly pursuit, any love of learning, any objective search for truth, or any honest profession. And therefore, as a community, without apology, we foster the fellowship of followers for Jesus. We do say, with the writer to the Hebrews, consider Jesus. He has the ultimate answers for fulfillment through the full humanity which he reveals. The other day, I was talking to a former college president, a man who had a distinguished career at one of our colleges nearby. And he said to me, "Have a good year." I said, "What makes a good year?" Perhaps somewhat facetiously, he replied, as college presidents are wont to reply, "Well, a good year would mean to balance the budget, to avoid any critical blow-ups, and to get a few breaks for the institution." Now, I know that he was aware that there are far more important things which make for a good year. And I've tried to tell you this morning what I believe they are. The fulfillment of student expectations for a quality education. The fostering and flowering of latent powers and abilities residing among us. And the decisions in the here and now of life to serve humanity in the Spirit of Jesus. Let's have a good year. Thank you.